10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 105. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. If you are a brand new listener, my name is Nick Manella. I'm the creator and host of the show, and I am so happy that you are joining us for yet another episode of a short jazz lesson. Just a reminder that you can get all of the PDFs to every single episode, all 105 that we've done so far, at our Patreon page. That's patreon.com/10-minute jazz lesson. Or you can head over to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, and click on one of the Patreon links to go over there, show your support, and get all the extras that come along with everything. I actually just posted the PDF to our first online masterclass, which we had for Patreon members at the end of April. So now that entire stream is online, and you can also grab the PDFs. We were talking about chord substitutions. I think a lot of folks got a lot out of that, so make sure you go and check that out. Just another fantastic benefit from being a Patreon member. So a big shout out to all the people that have come on board this week. Thanks to Aiden, Charlie, Alejandra, William, Peter, Stephen, and Harry. Thank you guys so much for signing up to become patrons and showing your support with that small $3 donation every single month. We really appreciate it. Keeps everything going around here and keeps the episodes coming at you. So that's about it for housekeeping this week. Let's jump into the episode. So this week what we're going to be talking about is one of the hardest tunes out there, Moment's Notice. And we're not just talking about Moment's Notice simply to study that tune. We're going to talk about a concept that I think is important when you're playing something with really, really dense chord changes, and chord changes that don't always follow the traditional, circle of fourths layout that so many of our standard tunes do. When you get to a tune like Moment's Notice, you are looking at a lot of things like chromatic 2/5 progressions and a really, really fast tempo, but with changes that really are going to mess with you. And I think that Moment's Notice is one of those tunes. I was talking with a fellow musician who I play in a band with, and we actually played this tune on a gig the other night, and he was saying, yeah, this tune really messes with me more than like other Coltrane tunes like Giant Steps or Countdown or any of that kind of stuff. This tune in particular has really, really difficult chord changes, and after we played that gig and I kind of fell all over this tune because I hadn't worked on it in a while, I decided to start working on it, and I figured this would be a perfect opportunity to talk about some of these concepts. So as the episode title states, what we're really looking to do is develop some flexibility. So let me expand upon that a little bit. If you are going to play over a tune like Moment's Notice, one thing that you can't really do is just kind of insert your 2/5/1 vocabulary into this tune, because it's going to sound really, really awkward. On a lot of other tunes that have more traditional chord changes, inserting some of that vocabulary almost verbatim will work much better than over a tune like this, where we have these half-step 2/5/1s happening at this really, really rapid pace. If you listen to Coltrane play over this tune, he's definitely not doing that. I mean, he is inserting the vocabulary that he worked on when he wrote these changes, but it's designed to have this really nice flow through the chord changes. And another thing that we don't really want to do when we play over a tune like this is we don't want to just play Coltrane lines or something like that, right? Because people have already heard that. So we want to kind of develop our own system for playing over this, and hopefully this episode will give you sort of a jumping off point. So if you take your PDF and you look at exercise number 1, you'll see what we're going to talk about today. So one thing that I like to do, and you guys know this, I've mentioned this on many other episodes, is I like to put parameters on myself. And I think that forces me into playing in somewhat of an uncomfortable way that will hopefully eventually become comfortable. So what we're going to explore, and this is going to be a part one of a part two, or a 2 episode series on developing this flexibility over a moment's notice. Today we're going to talk about the parameter of a descending line. So what that does is, if you look at the PDF, you'll see that we're concentrating on the first 8 measures of the chord progression to moment's notice. Now, putting this parameter of only playing a descending line means that we can't really use any pre-programmed vocabulary while we're playing over this, and it's going to kind of force us into a different way of thinking about the changes and approaching them. So on exercise number 1, what I've done is I've started on the 5th of the chord over the first measure. So that's a concert E minor 7 chord, and I'm starting on the 5th, so I'm starting on concert B. And my requirement is I need to generally be descending for 2 bars until I land on the resolution point in measure 3, which is an E flat major 7 chord. So if you look at the changes over the first 2 bars, we have E minor 7 to A7, and then we go to F minor 7 to B flat 7 to E flat. So the last 2 bars are in fact a 2-5-1 to the key of E flat major. But we see this chromatic 2-5. So we play E minor 7 to A7, which is a half step away from F minor 7 to B flat 7, then we resolve to that E flat major chord. So what I'm doing is I'm playing a descending line of all diatonic notes throughout the first measure, and then I'm also going to descend in that second measure, ultimately landing on a chord tone over the E flat major 7 chord. Now you'll notice there's one thing. When I make the transition from bar 1 to bar 2, I do actually momentarily go up a half step, but that is only to make the line fit within those changes. You'll notice that 99% of the line is actually descending. So what I'm doing is I'm forcing myself to connect these 2 very, very different measures of chord changes together by simply staying in the key and not using any of that pre-programmed vocabulary that we like to use so much, myself included. Then what I'm doing in measure 4 is I'm starting that whole cycle over again, jumping up to the 5th over the A flat minor 7 chord, and then I'm playing this long descending line that's going to ultimately resolve 3 bars later on the D flat major 7 chord. Now, one word is you are going to have to fit this to your instrument. So I always write my stuff to fit the saxophone because that's the instrument that I play. So at certain points, I'm going to have to displace octaves in order to make this exercise possible on my instrument, but that's totally fine. I'm actually continuing the line, but I'm just displacing the octave, all right? So I just talked for quite a while about how I actually formed this exercise, but now let's actually play it so you guys can hear how it fits over the changes, and you're going to notice a nice smooth transition from measure to measure, from chord progression to chord progression, and that's really the goal of this. All right, let's hear what exercise number 1 sounds like from this week. So what this is doing is it's really giving me a feel for the chord changes and how to get through them without falling back on just pasting together a bunch of 2-5-1 licks, which is going to sound really, really awkward on this. So it gives me the opportunity to play this really, really nice, smooth line, and I'm really learning the changes. I'm not just treating them like a robot, I guess you would say. All right, so what I'm doing on example number 2 is I'm doing the exact same exercise, But now instead of starting on the fifth in the first chord, I want to start my descending line. I'm actually starting on the root. So that's obviously going to give me a much, much different sound, and it's going to take me through different parts of the scale than the first example where I started on the fifth whenever I started my 2 or 3 measure phrase. So let's check out what example number 2 sounds like. Exact same concept, but different starting note, giving me the ability to think about it from a different angle. Now, obviously, I would continue this through the rest of the tune if I were doing this in real life. Now, you have a lot of different options, right? We talked about starting from the fifth, starting from the root. You could also start from the third. You could start from the seventh. You could start from the 9. So there's plenty of possibilities here, a lot of work to be done besides just the exercises that I'm showing you. But the whole point is to confine yourself to moving in one direction, because what that does is it breaks you out of your normal way of playing over something. And so many times, again, myself included, we find ourselves just floundering over a tune like this and just grabbing whatever notes that we know will fit instead of actually consciously and considerately playing through these changes. It takes a lot of time to get used to something like this, or Giant Steps, or some of those other really, really difficult tunes. But this is a great way to approach it that I think will give you a lifelong ability to play over it without always playing the same thing. You've got to really know the changes instead of kind of cutting and pasting your solo. All right. Next week, we're going to talk about a couple more ideas on this same concept. I'll show you some different ways to approach it with some different parameters that will up your game a little bit when it comes to playing over this, because just like anything else, if all you practice is this descending stuff, you're going to sound exactly the same. So we'll go over a little bit more advanced stuff next time and talk about some of the possibilities. Okay? So if you have any questions, make sure you email me, 10minutejazzlesson@gmail.com, and make sure you go on to the Patreon site so you can grab the PDF of this episode and really kind of analyze it and learn it for yourself. And we will see you on Monday with a Motivation Monday podcast. Hope everybody has a great weekend, and I will talk to you guys soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.